This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
I'm going to try this year to share with the Olam when I have a revelation during Ma'aveh Sedra. Now, usually I'm Ma'aveh Sedra after Tuesday, so it's from the week before, but I wanted to inspire the Olam that if you're Ma'aveh Sedra regularly, then Hashem rewards you with thoughts while you're being Ma'aveh Sedra. So I had a wonderful thought while I was being Ma'aveh Sedra this week, and that is that just like Rashi tells us that Lot was saved because of the schus, that when he was down in Mitzrayim with Avram, and Avram said that he was Sarah's brother in order that they shouldn't kill him, so Lot did not divulge that secret, even though he could have then inherited Avram if Avram would have been killed, but he didn't divulge that secret. In the reverse way, we find exactly the opposite that happened to Lot's wife. Lot's wife went out to borrow salt, divulging the fact that Lot invited guests, which was a capital crime in Sodom. So she divulged the secret and endangered her husband, and therefore she wasn't safe. And she was turned into a pillar of salt. So we see husband and wife, one did one way, one did the other way, and therefore we see the contrast. It's beautiful. One of my Choshev Balabatim, Reb Leizer Kern, shared with me also a wonderful thought, which it's so interesting that you could learn the parasha hundreds of times and never notice it. We know that Lot did a very strange maneuver when the mad rabble demanded that they hand over the angels, they didn't know it, they were angels, for Mishkav Zachar. So Lot made them a counter-proposal, which any father thinks is incredible. Right? Lot says, I have two pure girls, and they're untouched. A very rare commodity in Sodom. They're pure. Take them and do whatever you want with them. So, of course, it's amazing that he's ready to hand over his own daughters, his flesh and blood, to a mad mob to save strangers that he doesn't even know. Right? So, in previous Shiurim, I said in defense of Lot that Lot knew that the Malachim were coming to nuke Sodom v'Amorah and destroy 3 million people. And he was arguing the whole evening on behalf of these people, so that he felt that it was proper to risk the lives of his two, or the purity of his two daughters, to perhaps to save the cities, to save 3 million people. But the bottom line is, however you look at it, Reb Leizer Kern made the observation that he was willing to be mafker his daughters for immorality, and Mida Keneged Mida, they caused that his body should be hefker immorality, because, of course, they, thinking that the world was destroyed, slept with him and orchestrated that his body was used for an incestuous relationship. That's also a Mida Keneged Mida, measure for measure. He was willing to be mafker them, and they ended up being mafker him. It's amazing that you don't realize that, learning the parashas over and over again, you never realize that. Now, to come right away, to segue right away, I don't want you to think that I'm going to get carried away. There's so many things to speak about in this parasha. To segue right away to our parasha, which opens up with the subject of burial, there was a mice in Bnei Brak. It was well reported at the time, but of course, since it's 1960, 55 years ago, nobody is really going to remember it. But in 1960, on Rehov Bnei Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Brak, an old woman was walking across the street in front of the Beis HaKnesses HaGadol in Bnei Brak, and a car hit her and she died instantly. And of course, everybody ran out of the Beis HaKnesses. It was the middle of the day. And the woman was killed instantly. It killed her, totally killed her. And there was no identification on her. She was obviously Jewish, but there was no identification on her. And at that time, in the early 1960s, the forced autopsies were rampant. And especially, this was a Jane Doe. The authorities, it was a car accident, the authorities would have definitely taken her to the hospital and right away done an autopsy on her, mamish, and brutalized her body, and tear her body apart. So they brought her in straight into the Beis HaKnesses. Normally you don't bring in a person to the Beis, but they brought her straight into the Beis HaKnesses, and they said she's a Meis Mitzvah, they're going to bury her. In the meantime, of course, everybody tried to find out who she was, and they uncovered who she was. They found out who she was. She was from Cholon. She just happened to be that day in Bnei Brak. She had no family. She was a woman alone, no children, no husband. In the meantime, the police came. They heard about a car accident. They came. They came with about 7, 8 officers, and they demanded the body. You have to do due process. You have to do an autopsy. There has to be an investigation. Maybe it was an accidental death. So Yidden have an amazing ability to smell if something is about. And before long, 1,000 Charedim arrived in the Beis HaKnesses. And of course, they formed almost a barricade against the police. There's not going to be no autopsies. And the 7 policemen decided wisely that wasn't worth a public riot. There's nobody over here. It's a Jane Doe. And they just disappeared. Meantime, now there's 1,000 people here saying Tillim and excited to be part in the burial of a Meis Mitzvah. And this woman was taken to her kvura by 1,000 people saying Tillim for her. The situation became more perplexing when it turns out that Rebbetzin Kanievsky, Rebbetzin Batsheva Kanievsky, Reb Chaim's wife, knew this woman back in Kosovo and said that this woman ate on Yom Kippur. And therefore the mystery arose. Why should a woman who ate on Yom Kippur, who didn't keep Yiddishkeit, why was she zoicha to a levaya with 1,000 Charedim saying Tillim with such covet? She was brought with great covet to her final resting place. Until they uncovered the mystery and they found out that in the ghetto, during World War II, this woman was Meiser Nefesh to bury Kedoshim with great Mesiras Nefesh. And therefore the Midah B'Keneged Midah became incredibly obvious. She was Meiser Nefesh to bury Kedoshim during the war, and therefore the Rebbeinu Shalom orchestrated that she should be buried with great kavod when her final time came. And it wasn't easy to orchestrate that. The Rebbeinu Shalom, everything is easy. But you had to manipulate it, that she had to come for Cholon, be hit by a car, be threat of forced autopsy, so 1,000 people should come. You had to, pull a lot of strings that should happen. This week we learned tonight we learned in the Daf Yomi, B'midah she'adam meided in life. That's why the Isha Saita, if she committed adultery, so she made herself pretty for her paramar, and therefore we make her ugly, we unravel her hair, we take off her jewelry, we dress her in shmatas, we tear open her blouse, and the Gemara continues all about Midah Keneged Midah. Midah Keneged Midah is an extremely important belief in Yiddishkeit. A person should know that Hashem tzilcha al yad yaminecha. Hashem is your shadow. Now, how dare we call Hashem a shadow? But what it means is just like a shadow mimics a person to perfection, Hashem mimics us. Whatever we do. Like it says, the Baal Shem Tov said, I said this over many times, Dam alamala. If you want to know what's in store for you above, mimcha. Look at yourself. The way we behave, that's what's in store for us. And that's why mimcha is midah keneged midah. Mimcha is midah keneged midah. Dam alamala. You want to know what's in store, mimcha. That's the great crystal ball. So therefore, if a person screams a lot, then one day people are going to scream at him. If people are not careful to embarrass people, then they're going to get embarrassed. If people are not patient one day when they need patience, they're not going to get patient. There's a person who's not patient with people. One day he's sitting in the doctor's office and the doctor's not going to be patient with him. That's the way this world works. That's why we put so much emphasis in because the Gemara says in Masechta Sanhedrin that one of them is Hakayfer B'Tchias Amesim. And the Gemara says it's Mida K'neged Mida. If you don't believe in it, you won't get it. That's why every day we make it a passion 3 times a day to say clearly, I'm a believer. Because I want to get Tchias Amesim. I'm a believer. And that's why, it's important to point this out now. That's why this week's Parsha spends so much time, as the Medrash says, how many kulmusim, how many quills were broken, writing the story of the purchase of the Maras HaMachpelah, writing the story of Avram's dealing with the Bnei Ches, how he kowtowed to Ephron and paid a hoin rav. We have no idea how much Amameh, shekel, kesef. It was a huge amount. The Malbim and the Abarbanel both say that Avram, who introduced the belief in one God to the world, was now making a public exhibition of belief in life after death. And belief in that the body will come alive. You have to understand that was something novel. Even the refined people of the time, they felt you only put the body in the ground so that people shouldn't see it decay, shouldn't see it smell. But that's it. Or to take it a step further, the Abarbanel goes a step further. The Abarbanel writes that in his time there was a Greek philosopher, a famous Greek philosopher by the name of Diogenes. And when he was on his deathbed, he told his adherents that they should take his body and put it in an open field. So they said, but master, teacher, the animals will come and rip you apart. So he said, don't worry, put a stick in my hand. So he said, but when you're dead, you won't be able to defend yourself from the animals. He said, if I'm not able to defend myself from my animals, so why do I care if they'll rip me apart? That was the philosophy that he taught them. And therefore, Avraham Avinu was introducing the novel idea to spend 400 shekel kesef oivel ha-seifer, legal tender, on a grave, was such a novel idea to the guy. He was introducing to the world the concept of life after death and that the body will come back. And therefore, it is an Indian to respect the body. Because you have to understand that to us, what seems barbaric, cremation, is chosen by people as a sensible, preferred way. Because people say, why should my body get full of maggots? Take a piece of meat and you let it rot and it becomes infested with maggots. Why should my body become infested by maggots? It's clean, it's nice, burn the body, you have the ash, and then you take a nice plane ride and you put the ash over the sea. It's so nice and pleasant and clean. Or you keep an ash in an urn. There are people that really believe that that's the proper, clean, efficient way, to the point where they're getting unknowledgeable, where they're getting the ignorant Jews to buy urns in the shape of a menorah and a Sefer Torah and a Atzeres HaDibros to put ashes in. It's a scary thing. There exists this. So we have to know that Avram was teaching that the body it's not the end on the body. This body is going to come back. Hashem is going to give the tal of Torah, tal oros talecha, And the Tal, the dew of Torah, is going to cause the body to awaken. And therefore we respect the body. We don't give it to medical science. That body is going to come alive. You don't put it into a lab. And you definitely don't burn it. And it's also important to understand that the maggots are part of the kapara process. You don't want to deprive a person from the kapara of the maggots. The maggots are part. It says that the mace feels that. And it's part of the therapeutic process that a person shouldn't have to suffer in Gehenna. So Avraham Avinu is teaching, and always in this parsha, there are stories that come to light that awaken us in recent times to the awareness of the body. There's a famous story, and this is not so long ago, and it's so well known. There was a great tzaddik, the Baal Megala Amukos. Baal Megala Amukos has from his descendants Rabbi Meir Shapiro, Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz. The Baal Megala Amukos himself was an extraordinary person. For example, he wrote a sefer where he has 1,000 pirushim on the small aleph in the word Vayikra. 1,000 pirushim in the small aleph in the word Vayikra. He wrote a sefer where he has 252 pirushim on why Moshe Rabbeinu asked Ebra Nova Era to pass in and see Eretz Yisrael. And wherever the Baal Megala Amukos was, they say over, he only lived till 48. They say over that he provered gullus. For those that are unfamiliar, Tzaddim, the Goyin provered gullus. They used to go incognito in disguise and travel like a beggar to suffer and to see that if they could live even outside of the Dalet Amos as over a Yid. So the story goes that the Baal Megala Amukos was traveling in the forest and he got caught by a band of thieves. So they said, if you're a robber like us and you want to join our ranks, then you'll save your life. But if you're a spy, an informer, then we're going to kill you. So the Megala Amukos writes that the Rebbeinu Shalom revealed to him secrets of thievery, which he shared with them, and they were so impressed with his safe-cracking ability that they spared him, and they made him a member of the gang. So they went to steal in a palace, in an armon, and they were caught. So the lord of the palace arrested them and he's going to put them to death. So as the Megala Amukos was in the cell, he had a cholam that the Meshorsim of the lord of the baron were going to poison him the next morning. So when the baron came to hear his last request, so he told him, look, I'm not really a thief, I got caught. He said, sure. He said, listen, I was sent here for your benefit. Your avodim, your servants, are going to poison you tomorrow. He says, you don't have to believe me, but I ask you that before you eat your breakfast, have the dogs taste it. Which he promptly did, and the dogs died. And he released the Megala Amukos. So the Megala Amukos was a well-known Baal Meifis and Tzaddik Hador. You look at his descendants and his Talmidim. Anyway, that's not what the story is about. The story is about the Megala Amukos had in the base of Kforis, a spot next to him that was opened in the cemetery. And one day, a young man shows up and says that he wants to buy the plot next to Megala Amukos. So the head of the Chevra Kadisha, the Rosh of the Chevra Kadisha, says, you must be kidding. You must be joking. Who are you? You're a Rash Kabag? I mean, you must be joking. You want to get the grave next to the Megala. He says, yes, I'm going to offer you millions of ruble. So he says, yeah, but... So the man persisted. He came a few days, day after day. And the Rosh then thought, we're broke. Millions of ruble. He says, I'm an old man. I'll make the deal. I'll take the money. He says, I'll pass away. Nobody will know about it. This guy's a young man. By the time, nobody will know about it. They'll never believe him. Not very praiseworthy deal, but he did it at least l'shem shamayim. He took several million rubles from him, and he never even wrote it down in the log of the Beis Chaim. That night, the young man died. Ay. Now what does he do? But nobody knows about it, so he didn't tell anybody. He buried him somewhere else. That night, after the burial, the man comes to the Rosh of the Chevra Kaddish in a dream. He says, you didn't honor our deal. I paid you 2 million ruble. I want you to bury me in the right spot. And he gets up the next morning. Divrei chaloimus, loy malim, v'loy maridin. The next night he comes again. He says, listen, if you're not going to bury me in the right place, I'm going to call you to Din Torah Tishamayim. That's no joke. To go to Din Torah Tishamayim, you have to die. Lo yaleinu. So he ran to the Rav of Krakow, who at that time, the Rav of Krakow was Rav Sirkish, the Bach. He told the Bach. So the Bach said, okay, when he comes to you tonight, which is inevitably going to happen, tell him in the dream that this is a really interesting story. It's recorded all over the place, this story. Tell him in the dream that you're calling him to Din Torah by the Bach for this and this hour. So he did, and the man was master. So in the Bach's Bezdin, they set up a mechitza, and at the specific hour, they asked him if he's there, and he said yes. And he says, what claim do you have to the grave next to the Megala Amukas? So he says, I bought it. I paid $2 million from the Rosh. So the Bach turns to the Rosh and he says, yes, it's true. He did buy it. But I didn't honor it because I didn't know who he was. I couldn't bury somebody in the grave next to the Megala Amukas without knowing who he is. It would be a shame to the Gadol Yisrael. So the Bach says to him, tell me who you are, that I should know if you're worthy to be buried next to the Megala Amukas. We have a responsibility. So the man said, I'm not telling you. I made a deal. You heard that the deal was emes? Honor the deal. It's a pella the psak of the Bach. The Bach paskin, look, you don't want to tell us who you are. We cannot just bury anybody next to the Megala Amukas. But on the other hand, you bought the grave. We're going to open the grave. If you have a right to it, move over there. They opened the grave. The morning after they opened the grave that the young man was buried in was open, and the grave next to the Megala Amukas was sealed. And they put up a matzeva in Krakow, Po Nitman, Ploini ben Ploini, Eina Yedea Mihu, Avol Yagid Olav Reyai. But let his companion testify on him. Now this didn't happen several thousands of years ago. This Ma'isa happened b'fnei ein Kel very recently, a few hundred years ago. And I say this Ma'isa in order to elaborate on what Avraham Avinu is teaching us in life, belief in life after death. And of course, together with that, in Schar Vaynish. Now, I don't want to get carried away with stories. But I want to tell you one more story about a grave, which I might have once mentioned this shir years before. I think I might have. But I want to say it over again anyway. This story happened with the Beis Halevi in Brisk. Now, you know that it's a minig of Klal Yisrael several times a year to go to the basic first. Once is on Tisha B'Av. And I remember going with Rav Moshe many Tisha B'Avs to a basic first in Woodsboro, where Rav Moshe would walk through the graves and look at the tombstones. So similarly, the Beis Halevi in Brisk went to the basic first. Maybe it was Tisha B'Av, maybe it was Yimei Elul, so it's Yimei Tshuva. Anyway, he was walking through the graves, and he finds two graves, mamish right next to each other, with like two twin matzevas. And on one matzeva, it says Kappa Persaliani, and on the other matzeva, it continues V'yodeha Shilcha Levya. Now, if it would be today, I would say it's a husband and wife. And together they did chesed, and they share kappa personally. You know, there are in many cemeteries where they bury husbands next to wives. And don't look at that strange. Don't say it's taruvis. That's the way it was in Marsa Machpelah. In Marsa Machpelah, they were buried zugais. Right? So I know of a couple, a wonderful couple, Jordan and Esther Weiss in Staten Island. They used to own the pizza shop in Staten Island. They passed away pretty close next to each other, as is the case many times with husband and wives. They don't want to live without each other. And they're buried, and they have one bed that matzevis were put up at the same time. They have one bed over their two graves with one big matzeva. So, you know, they're together in death as well, which Reb Miller always says that marriage is a huge investment. It's for this world and the next world. He said that's why they're buried in Marsa Machpelah Zugas, to tell you that it's for the next world too. So, but in this basic process, it wasn't women next to men. So what's pshat? So, in the log of the Beis HaKfaris, the Beis Halevi found that what happened was there were two partners that were miridik about tzedakah. They gave so much tzedakah, it was unbelievable. And Galgo HaChayze Ba'aylam, they lost all their money. It was such a pellet to people that these Bali tzedakah should have such a reversal that they convened the Din Torah to see maybe they did something wrong. And the Din Torah mamish analyzed their lives, probably with their reshus, and they could only find one thing that they did wrong: that they gave more than a fifth to tzedakah. Because it says, "Al yavaziveis yoysim echon." She shouldn't give more than a fifth. So Beis Din rendered the decision that from now on they can't give more than a fifth. So people still came to them. Mamish came to them all the time, and they still gave. And when they ran out, and it was going to be more than a fifth, they were wringing their hair. How could they? They never turned anybody away. So what they do? They decided that the psak was only for money, but household items they could give. So they started giving their leichter, the menorah for Hanukkah. They started giving the silverware. One day, two aniyim came to the house, and they had nothing. And they searched the house, and they searched the house. They couldn't find anything left. Until one said, "Yeah, I got something." He opened up the sugar holder, and he found in the sugar holder a golden spoon, which was worth, it was solid gold. They were very rich people. So he said, "Well, what are you going to do? It's two aniyim." So they took the spoon and they broke it in half. And they gave the spoon to one ani, and the handle to the other ani. And it made such a rash in the town that when they were nifted, they wrote on the matzevas, kappa porcelani, 1 spoon they gave to an ani, the yodea and the handle shel chalevya. Kaladik azah. Kaladik azah. Okay, we have to continue. It's a big parsha, and there's a lot to do. Avram came to eulogize Sarah and to cry over her. Says Rashi, where did he come from? He came from Har Maria. He came from the Akedah. Many say that that's why there's a small chaf in Lifkaisa, not just because if you take out the chaf, it reads Ulabita, because at that time the daughter Bakol also passed away. But there's a small chaf because we don't want anybody to think that he was crying, that he was regretting the Akedah, because it was from news of the Akedah that Sarah passed away. So he didn't cry a lot, and nobody should misinterpret that he had karota lamafreya over the Akedah, and that would take away the whole schus. But the Rav Zalman Tzaratzkin in the Oznaim L'Torah says that Rashi, when he says that Avram came from Har Maria, there's a different kavanah than just telling you from which town Avram came from. He said that was the subject material of Avram's hesped. He said to capsulize Sara Imenu is you had to see the son Yitzchak that she made. When I was by the Akedah, why do you think it's known as Akedah's Yitzchak? Yitzchak said, tie me tight, Tati, lest I get scared and I move and I disqualify the Shechita, or lest I fight off and I might make a Chabura on my Tata. That's what he was worried about at the time of the Akedah. Not losing his life. Disqualifying the Shechita, being over on Kibbut Avein, on Yishimai Vaviv Tiro. Says, a mama that could raise such a son, that's the hesped. That's what it means. So they say over, you've heard from me often, how important it is, the tutelage of a mama. David HaMelech, who had a father, Yishai, who had 600,000 students a day, Nichnas Bechlusa v'Yatz Bechlusa, who never sinned. He was one of the 4 people who never sinned. But David HaMelech said, Ani Abducha ben Amosecha. He gave credit to the mama. The koyach of a mama. So Rav Hutner, the great Rosh Yeshiva of Chaim Berlin, Friedrich Rosh Yeshiva of Chaim Berlin, Rav Hutner says over a story that when he was a young man, a young bacher, he came home Pesach's man and he told his mother excitedly that he finished Bava Kama. So when his mother heard this, here she is getting ready for Pesach. You know, a mother getting ready for Pesach. When she heard this, she said, oh, this calls for a big celebration. She set a Shabbos table, it wasn't Shabbos. And she made a Suda. And then she says, Tati brought me a special outfit for Pesach. I'm going to put it on now. So little young Reb Hutner said, Mommy, but Tati is going to want you to save it for Yom Tov. She said, listen, after Pesach comes Shavuos. This year, Shavuos for me came before Pesach. And she put on the Pesach dress to celebrate her son finishing. Rav Hutner said it made such a roshim on him, how his mother was machshav his accomplishment, that he never forgot it. That's the impression of a mama. Shma medi musar avicha v'al tita ishtay rasi mecha. Rav Kahneman, the great giant of Panovich, Rav Kahneman says that he remembers they were so poor. One day there was a heavy snow, and there only was 1 pair of boots. So there were 3 boys, and they said, two of us are going to get not to go to school today. You know, children love not to go to school. Until they were amazed, the mother went with the first son, brought him to Cheder, then came back and brought back the boots, and went with the second son, and then came back through the drifts and went with the third son. Know what it was for their older mother to walk through the drifts 3 times in the freezing cold and the snow? But they never forget their mother's Mesiras Nefesh, that they should learn Torah. That's the mama's impact on children. Now, another interesting thing. Vatoma Sara bekiryas arba hi chevroi. It's a mystery. How came Sarah to Kiryas Arba? Avram and Sarah were living in Beersheba. Beersheba is very far away from Hebron. How came Sarah Imenu without Avram? She didn't drive Sarah. How came Sarah Imenu to Hebron? It's a big mystery. So the Shach al Torah. Now this is not Shach on Shulchan Aruch. This is Shach al Torah, written 500 years ago. Shach al Torah writes that the Satan came to Sarah and said, "Where's Avram?" So Avram had told her. Now, if you have to say an untruth, always make it close to the truth, right? The best lie is the truth. So Avram told Sarah that he was going to teach Yitzchak the dinim of karbanos, which was true. He was just using him as an example. Right? So she got very frightened. So she told that to the son. The son says, "Yeah, but he didn't tell you the whole story. Yitzchak is going to be the carbon that they're going to use for the demonstration." So she panicked, and she traveled to Hebron because over there were the giants, Achimon, Sheshai, and Talmai. The Sultan said it would be on Har HaMoriah. So she said, "You're tall. Tell me if you see anything happening on Har HaMoriah." So they said, "We see a man bending over and wielding a knife over a young man." And when they said that, she expired. So that's how she got to Hebron. Now the Yotzes Pnimi Torah is moisif that the moral of the story is don't let the Satan get you to do anything. She shouldn't have gone to Hebron. Shouldn't have listened to the Satan. Now, we know Vayishkel Avram leEphraim es hakesef asher diber. Avram measured out to Ephraim the money which he spoke about. Arba meya shekel kesef oivel aseicha. 400 shekel kesef legal tender oivel aseicha. So we all know there's about Turim Rabbeinu Bachya that Ephraim over here is the only place now Ephraim is spelled without a vav. Why? Because when he took this money, after promising between two friends like us, he used, "Oh, you have him. Take whatever you want. Ish mimenu, any man will not hold back his resting place." It says about Aturim, he lost the letter of his name because he made a lot of promises. Right? He charged him not bargain basement prices. He overcharged him to the hilt. He said a lot. We're friends. And as I've pointed out many years, Shma Gorim, Ephraim without the Vav is exactly B'gematria 400. It's the same letters as Piron and Ophron. So he exacted payment for Ophar $400. So it's all in the name. That was Ephron's whole yichus in life. But there's more over here than meets the eye. More over here than meets the eye. The Sefer, the Rabbeinu Bachya writes that Ephraim without a vav is Ra'ayin, one who has a stingy eye. Ra'ayin, Reish Ayin is 270, Ayin is 340, Yud is 350, Nun is 400. So when you take away the vav, so that's Ra'ayin. He had the contrast in this parsha between the evil eye, the stingy eye of Ephraim, and the kindness of Rivka. The Avos Chesed of Rivka is made to contrast. But the Chaim Shel Torah adds something else. It's a very dicke word. The Chaim Shel Torah says that why just now, when Ephraim takes the payment, does he lose a letter from his name? He says because when he got the huge amount of 400 shkalim, he became a poorer person. Because Mishiach Shloimana writes a Messiah. Ein adam meis v'chatzi tavosa b'yadai. So now that he got the 400, now he wants more. Now he becomes, it's precisely now that he becomes poor. And I saw a moiridik pshat. First of all, the Klei Yakar says that that's why the letters after Ani is Kesef. After Yud is a Chav, and after an Ayin is a Samach. Right? Letters after Ani, so after Ayin is a Samach, after Nun is, after Ayin is a Pei, after Nun is a Samach, and after Yud is a Chav. So the letters after Ani is Kesef, because they're intertwined. When a person gets more money, he becomes poorer. Because, and the further he gets away from being satisfied, you have 100, you want 200. You have 200, you want 400. You have 1 million, you want 2 million. You have 2 million, you want 4 million. And I saw a myri dikeremes to this. The nister of mammon, every word has a nister. So mem is mem. So the letter that's nister is mem. The nister of mammon, the hidden part of the letter, is also mammon. Because mem is mem, mem is mem, vav is vav, and nun is nun. Because whenever you get something, that's the amount you're missing. If you have 100, you're missing another 100. You have 200, you're missing another 200. You have 1 million, you're missing, so you become less and less satisfied. That's why when Ephraim got it, that's when he was missing from his name. And when he got the 400, so it's back to your 400, he's missing 400. So to show this lesson, I saw something amazing from the Heilige Reb Shlomo Mabavav. To mention Reb Shlomo Mabavav, Tzadik L'Vracha, Schusi Yagan Aleinu, Ne'im Sheberebbes. Reb Shlomo Mabavav, you know, you have a Rebbe, you have a Rebbe's blick at something it says in the Parsha. So he says, it says that Avram, when Eliezer got to love him, we're glad, Mr. Simon, on election day you were able to make it.
Election.
Huh?
Starts working at the election.
I know. We're very happy you can make it. So he says over from, it says, V'anoichi finisi habayis, I cleared the house, or makam legamalim. Now, you have to be a Rebbe to see this in the pasuk. Literally, it means, Lavan said, I cleared the house, and Rashi says, from Avodah Zarah, certain Gedalim, they won't have a parlor meeting in the house unless they take out of the house the television. And I heard this already. I was in Toronto once, and the people told me that they had a television, but the Rebbe wouldn't come into the house unless they removed the television. So it was reminiscent of what happened over here. Eliezer comes. He says, you could come. Finisi Abayis. And Rashi says, we took out the Avodah Zarah. We took out the Trophim. Umakam legamal in this room. You have 10 camels. Don't worry, we have the stables. But you got to see how the Baba Rebbe looked at this. He says, we know that by some people, money is an Avodah Zarah. Atzabeyem kesef azav. Their idols are silver and gold. What kind of idols? Ma'asiyah adam. People's handiwork. They're fakoif to the money. When that's the case, it's very hard for them to part with money and give tzedakah. Says Reb Shlomo Mabavov, only, listen how he looked at a pasuk, V'anoichi finisi abayis. If a person could say that I remove from my house that obsession with money, then umokim, he doesn't read it l'gemalim, then umokim l'goymlin, then you'll be able to be goymel tayv, you'll be able to do gemilas chasadim. That's how he learns the pasuk. If a finisi abayis, if I clean from the house my obsession with money, then umokim l'gemalim, then there's mokim l'goymlin, then there's a chance to do gemilas chasadim. Hashem Berechas Avram Bakol. Let's talk a little bit more about money. It says Hashem Berechas Avram Bakol. You know, nowadays they say he even has a stamp in his name. They made a Harry Potter stamp, L'Avdil. Right? So Hashem Berechas Avram Bakol, he had a coin. Says the Medrash, they minted a coin. A matbeya yeshloi. There was a coin, a euro, used all over. And what was the coin of Avram? A zokenu zekena on one side, and a bacher and a besula on the other side. An old man and an old woman on one side, and a young man and a young woman on the other side. So Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, the Rav of Yerushalayim, Tzvi Pesach Frank, the Rav of Yerushalayim, said that he heard a Maridik Pshat in this. He heard that the lesson of the Matbei of Avram is that life is very fleeting. And before you know it, a young person becomes an old man. A young woman is an old lady. It's just like the flip of a coin. So that's the lesson. And I think that then it's perfect why it's on this pasuk. It says Hashem Berechas. It says V'Avram Zokein Bo Bayomim. What's Pshat Bo Bayomim? He came with every day. He used every day. And we all also know the same thing it says by Sara. Yemei Shnei Chayai Sara Kulin Shavim L'Taiva. She used every day. That's why it says the Pnei David, the Chidah says Vayiyu, the first word in this week's Pasha, Vayiyu, is a palindrome. It's read both ways the same. Because Kulin Shavim L'Taiva, backwards and forwards, are Kulin Shavim L'Taiva. That's the way Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank learns Pshat in this coin. It's a little bit schwer. Because then I believe it should have said that on the first side it was Yeled and Yalta, and on the other side was Zaken and Zaken. But that's the word. Before long, you'll become old. It says the other way. It says Zaken and Zaken on one side, and Yeled and Yalta on the other side. So therefore, I wanted to learn two pshatim. One is that it's celebrating the miracle that Avram and Sarah became miraculously young again. Sarah became a young woman. The whole world saw that she was able to nurse at 90. After that, she had a daughter yet. Avram had children at 140 with Keturah. They say that it wasn't even a miracle then, worthy of mention, because he already became a young man. Chizkuni says that. So on one side it was Zakin Zakena, and the flip side is the miracle that they became a Yalad V'Yal. That's one shot I wanted to say. Second shot I wanted to say is that it's teaching us this lesson. That not only were they special when they got older, but they were special when they were younger. Like we say, Kulan Shavim L'Tayva. Like we say, Bon Bayami, there are people that when they grow up, they become famous. But they were special when they were older, they were special when they were younger. But then I saw a third shot in the Sefer Yagdul Torah. He says that it was teaching us that the greatest strength of Avram, what did we say? What was the greatest strength of Avram? Ki yadativ, I loved him. Why? Avram's greatest koyach was the Messiah to his children. That's why Zokan and Zaken on one side, on the other side was Yel and Yalda. According to this pshat, Yel and Yalda were not young Avram and Sara, the way everybody learns. It was Yitzchak and Rivka. And that was Avram's koyach. That's why there's nothing left from Yeshiva Shei Ve'eva. That's why Noach and Chanoich and Mr. Shelach weren't given the koyach of Avram to pass the Messiah. Now, once you learn that the Yelon and the Yalda were Yitzchak and Rivka, you could learn that there's another thing. And it was celebrating the miracle of Yitzchak and Rivka. Yitzchak was born after 190 years. And Rivka survived in the den of sin, idolatry, and cruelty of Besuel, the miraculous Kvitzas Haderech, the coming of the well, that the world knew, the rising of the well. Yagdul Torah adds one other thing. And he says this lesson of Messiah is possible when there's a matbeya. We need coins for yeshivas. The maiden that says, tilt your pitcher, ve'eshte, v'amar shesei, and she says, drink, v'gam gamalecha eshke. Ashke, I'll give to your camels too, the 10 camels too. The bathtub's full too. Oysa achachta lavdecha liyitzchak. Klei Yoker and countless others say that to find the mother of Klal Yisrael, you would think to find a mother for Klal Yisrael. Ima shel Yisrael, Yitzchak was angel Yisrael. You need a whole shopping list. No. We're going to ask her for a drink. She offers more than we ask. She's about chesed. She has avas chesed. That's the one. That's the one. To build a Klal Yisrael. That's the one. What a practical lesson. I pointed out by my Matzah Shabbos learning program this week. It fell out on Halloween. We had police protection in the shul. We had so many children there. Almost 100 children. I pointed out that somebody might be tempted to say trick or treat is almost the same thing as Shalach Manos. When in reality, trick or treat is the opposite of Shalach Manos. What's trick or treat? Give me a treat or I'll play a trick on you. So the thrust of Shalach Manos is getting something. And the thrust of trick or treat is getting something. The thrust of Shalach Manos is giving something. A yid is a nice. And the idea of not just doing what you're asked for, but doing more, that's Avas Chesed. And that's why a good husband, a good wife, should not just say, I do whatever they ask, but should offer to help. What can I do for you? To take the initiative. Because that's the midah of chesed that we're looking for. That's Avas Chesed. Just to share with you one story about chesed. This is such a yesod. It's the foundation of Yiddishkeit. The first of was not Yitzchak Torah, was not Yitzchak Avodah, was not Yaakov Torah, was Abraham, it was chesed. Sometimes in the camps, the Nazis, would play sport with the Yidden, with the Kedoshim. They were so hungry, they would take a bilkila and throw it in the barrack and watch the Jews fight over the bilkila. They would watch them fight over it. My father told me that in his barrack there were 90 people. So Shtel Zafar, in Auschwitz, in the barrack, the Nazi comes in and throws a bilkula, and he watches with glee 90 Yidden tearing themselves apart to get a hold of that bilkula. So Yid related that he was in the lager together with the Klozim Rebbe Zech Tzadik Levrachas Chusi Yogan Aleinu, and he saw this happen through a loaf. And you know, the more refined people didn't go to claw. And he watched to his amazement that the Klozim Rebbe jumped into the fray and also started fighting for the challah. And was shocked until he saw afterwards the Klozim Rebbe come out of the fray and walk over to the corner. There was a sick Yid who was dying. And he took his piece and he gave it to that Yid. That's why he jumped into the fray. For a sick Yid, that's chesed. That's the chesed of Yiddishkeit. Ma Hashem yotza dover. From here we learn, even though it came from the mouth of Rishonim, but nisnaba ve'ini yodea ma nisnaba. From here we learn the idea of Ma Hashem yotza dover, that shidduch is from Shemayim. You'll forgive me for the inordinate amount of stories in tonight's shir, although I always get calls. Don't say forgive me, I love the stories I share with my family. I don't set out to say many stories, it's how it comes out. There's a tremendous lesson in this. The Imrei Emes had a good chassid, a devoted chassid, who had a devoted chassid who was very poor, and he kept on begging the Rebbe, give me a bracha for wealth. Oh, if I was wealthy, I could do so much more in Avodas Hashem. I'd be able to learn with better menuchas hanefesh. I'd be able to do so much more for my family. I could help in the city. I have a caring heart. Rebbe, give me a bracha, please. Rebbe, I know it's in your car. Give me a bracha for Hashivas. Make me a nugget. And each time he walked away disappointed. The Rebbe said, Zolzan Gesund, he gave him a nice bracha, but he refused to give him a bracha. One time, the chassid, Mamish, came in and he pushed the Rebbe. He said, Rebbe, please, I know you give it to other people. I'm such a dedicated chassid, please. So the Rebbe told him, no, Zolzain Azoi. It should be that way. And the man struck it rich. He became a phenomenally wealthy person, and he, true to his word, he was a very philanthropic person, and he learned more. It was really... He had a son who was a Metzuyan, excellent boy. And now that he was wealthy, he commanded the right to ask for miyuchsas for one of the top girls in the town. Epis Shidduchim weren't going. The son was in an accident, and they had to amputate part of his foot. And after amputating part of his foot, he had to settle for the tailor's daughter. The Imrei Emes told him, I have to tell you, the tailor's daughter was your son's shidduch. If you wouldn't have been wealthy, you would have went right to her and be very happy with her. When you became the big aristocrat, you wouldn't look at her. The Rebbeinu Shalom had to cut off a part of your son's foot in order that he should get his shidduch. If you wouldn't have been wealthy, you wouldn't have needed that your son should have an amputation. That's why we ask Hashem to be mamale mishaliseinu l'toiva. We don't always know what's good for us. We only ask Hashem to be mamale. It's a very powerful story. Mamale mishaliseinu l'toiva. Now, for the final thought of the evening, and I have to tell you that this is I speak about this many times. I even doubted whether I should bring it up again, but I find it so interesting, different opinions. Before I do so, first of all, we're aiming to daven Marav at 11:15, and as we're close to 11:15, I asked somebody to get ready to daven. We'll have tonight's shir available. It is also a Chayai Sara from last year, and there's a shir that I gave in Rabbi Welch's shul last week, a week ago Sunday, on the matzav of the stabbings in Eretz Yisrael. So we got to that shir as well, is available if anybody wants it. I thank our anonymous sponsor. Anybody wants to sponsor future weeks, it's $300, $360 to be a postal sponsor. Vayosef Avram, vayikach isho shma keturah. So as the Chizkuni and the Chayai say, Vayosef Avram means he took her again. So that's a raya that Keturah was Hagar. Rashi says she was called Keturah because Shanoi Maaseh Ketairis. Her ways were sweet like Ketairis. And Shekatra, which means she tied Pischah from the day she left Avram, she never was with another man. Which, by the way, is not like Rav Sadia Gaon. Rav Sadia Gaon learns that when it says that she had Keturah had Zimron and Yokshan, it means that she raised them by him, but she only had from Avram Yishmael, because in Divrei Yomim it says Avram only had 2 children, Yishmael and Yitzchak. This is not like Rav Sadia Gaon, because according to Rav Sadia Gaon, obviously she wasn't Kitra Pischah. She didn't tie her Pesach. She was obviously with somebody else. But the accepted opinion was she was Hagar, and she was called Keturah because she was Noam Maaseh Ketairis, and because she was Katra Pischeha. The Rameir Shapiro, and much before him, in an ancient sefer Birchas Shmuel, not from Rabbi Ber, the same shot was said. There's a mysterious Gemara in Zvachim Samach Beis Amud Beis. The Gemara in Zvachim says, "Bnei Achsei shel Rav Tarfon yoshvu lefanav." Rav Tarfon's nephews were sitting before him. Lefnei Rabbi Tarfon. They weren't talking. He wanted to see if they talked certain Torah. They weren't talking. So Pasach v'Amar, he wanted to open them up, and he opened up and he said, "V'Yosef Avram v'Yikach Isho Shmo Yochni," and her name was Yochni. So he got them to talk. They said, "Amr like Turksib." It says in the Torah, "Kara Aleim B'nei Keturah." He said about them B'nei Keturah. You're B'nei Keturah. What's going on? First he misquotes it Pasuk, then he calls his nephews B'nei Keturah. So Rashi learns the Gemara Kipshutai. Rashi says that, Rashi in Zvachim says that he saw that they weren't talking, he wanted them to talk, so he said, he made up something. Dvarim ba'alma. So they said, no, her name was Keturah. So he said, well, you don't speak any Torah, you're like the B'nai Keturah. That's the way Rashi learns. The Rameir Shapiro, and before him, this Birchas Shmuel, way before him, says an unbelievable pshat in this Gemara. Rameir Shapiro quotes another pshat in the Medrash, that Hagar was called Keturah because she was Hiktira l'Avodah Zarah. She was Maktit Avodah Zarah. And there's a riot to that, because the Torah says, Vatelach Vateisa, she went and she strayed. And Rashi says she returned to Avodah Zarah. So which one was it? It was Noam Maaseh Ketairis, or she was Iktira L'Avodah Zarah. She smoked up incense. So Rameir Shapiro speaks and says that she was both. She looked like she was Noam Maaseh Ketairis, but she was a phony. She really smoked Ketairis Avodah Zarah. And that's why he said, V'yosef Avram, and he took an Isha Shmo Yochni. Because the Gemara in Sotah says there was a Machashefa by the name of Yochni Bas Retiva, who used to cast spells on women that they shouldn't be able to give birth. And when they were in the 9th month and they couldn't give birth, she then came and she says, I'll daven. And she davened and took off the spell, and then they gave birth. She was known as a great miracle worker. But really, she was a phone. So, Vayosef Avram Vayikachisha Shmo Yochni, he said that Reb Tarfon said she's a faker like Yochni. So the nephew said, but her name is Keturah. And Keturah means Shena Maaseh Keketiris and Shekotra Pischah. He said, you want to know which one is true? Look at the Bnei Keturah. She had children, Zimran. The Gemara says she was Mezamel Avodah Zarah. Yokshan, Shehekish Toif Avodah Zarah. It must be like I say she was a phony, because look at the children she had. That's the way Ramir Shapiro and the Birchas Shmuel learns Pshat in the Gemara. Lamaisa is, the Chidah asks in the Pnei David on the Birchas Shmuel, it's very schwer, because the Gemara in Sotah that tells us the story of Yochni was an Amayra, which happened way after the Tana, Rabbi Tarfon. It's a big kasha, big kasha. If you look at the Sefer Yitzis Penina Atari, he has possible terutzim. Mine says, I found the Mashah in Zvachim that says Beferish that Hagar was a Ksheira. You always wonder when he says Ksheira if he also means Kisara. That's another story. But it's very difficult to say Rameir Shapiro's Pshat. Because number one, it says Yitzchak ba mi be'er lachai roi. Marvin 11:15. Yitzchak ba mi be'er lachai roi. Yitzchak brought it. You mean he fooled Yitzchak? And Avram, Vayosef Avram, he fooled Avram? And Hagar, we know, is Begamati Yitzchak. And I once explained that why was it Noam Maaseh Kektiris? Why didn't they call her Naomi or Nama? Shneima Maaseh, Nama, the wife of Noach, the wife of Shlomo. But she became good after she was burnt, after she was sent away. And the Malach came, that's what Chizkuni says, she learned her lesson. And the Malach told her, go back. She learned her lesson, she was like Keteris that only become good after it's burnt. It's very schwer pshat. And I just wanted to give a little bit of the story, even though we could say that maybe Yitzchak was fooled like he was fooled by Esau. And maybe this was the machlokes between Avram and Sara, and that Sara was right and Avram wasn't. A very interesting machlokes we have over here between the giants.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.